So good morning, everyone. So for this morning, we will be discussing the histology of the eye. So I suggest before you even try to read on some details on the histology, you try to look at the anatomic description of the structures for you to understand how the eye works and for you to understand the different histologic structures of the eyes. So the eyes actually functions in the same manner as that of the camera. So you have an image here and an essential component that is the light. So light usually passes through first through the lens. Okay, so if you notice here, the light is usually not scattered. So we call this accommodation, that's the bending of the light rays. So an image here is reflected on the lens, the cornea. Then you have here your lens. Okay, so this bending of the light in front and after the image, it usually projects an inverted image into the retina and into the structure of the camera. However, it is in the brain here that usually interprets the image in an upright position. Okay, so the eyes usually function in the same manner as that of the camera. So there are three actual coats that are found in your eyes. So this is the outer coat. When we discuss the coats, you have the anterior portion and you have the posterior portion here. So for the outermost coat, you have the cornea as the outermost, the anterior layer, cornea. Posteriorly, it is continued as the sclera. So here at the junction between your cornea and the sclera, this is what we call as our limbus. Okay, so next to the outer covering, you have the vascular or the middle layer, or what we call as our uvea. So the middle layer is also composed anteriorly. You have the iris. You have here the ciliary body. Within the ciliary body are the ciliary muscles. This one here are called your ciliary processes. So this is the middle coat anteriorly. But posteriorly, this middle coat is continuous as your choroid. Then your innermost coat here is what we call the yellow thing here. This is our retina. The retina is usually found at the posterior aspect of the eyeballs. So you have the non-visual part of the retina that functions mostly for barrier. Then you have the photosensitive part or the neuronal part of the retina, where it consists of your rods and cones. Then you have here your retinal pigment epithelium. So these are the three coats of your eyeballs. Now, embryologically speaking, this is how the eye structures come into play. So development of eye structures usually starts at the beginning of the fourth week. So you have here your diverticulum or outpouching bilaterally from the forebrain, and this usually is at the level of your diencephalon. Now this diverticulum here usually forms your optic vesicle and your optic stalk. Now this optic vesicle will become your optic cup here, okay, which forms the retina, the iris, and your ciliary body. Now the mouth of this cup here will begin to form your pupils. Now the inner layer of the cup, this one here, usually forms your nervous layer of the retina, or this is what we call as our neuroretina, while the outer layer of the cup here usually forms the retinal pigment epithelium. Okay, so this optic stalk usually forms in the succeeding development. This optic stalk usually forms your optic nerve. And this one is invaginated by your blood vessels, your hyaloid artery, and your central retinal artery. Okay, so this is how the embryology of the eyes are usually processed. Now, the eyes usually come from your neuroectoderm. The structure of the eyes usually comes from the neuroectoderm, the surface ectoderm, and from your mesoderm origin. So again, from the forebrain of the diencephalon, you have this optic stalk, the optic vesicles, which actually leads to these specific structures. So what are these derivatives? These are actually the derivatives of the eyes from these three embryologic sources. So you have here your surface ectoderm. Okay, so you have your neural ectoderm that gives off these structures. Then you have your mesoderm. Just kindly take a look at the specifics of these embryonic structures. Now, the eyes also have two segments. You have here your anterior segment. Usually, in the segments of the eye, it is the lens that usually divides it into an anterior segment and a posterior segment. So the anterior segment is where you find your cornea, your anterior chamber contents, and your posterior chamber. Now, for the posterior segment, you have the vitreous chamber here. You have the posterior, the sclera. You have the choroid or the uvea, and you have your retinal layers. So that's the segment of the eyes. Now, this one here, the anterior and the posterior chamber are usually filled with your aqueous humor, while the vitreous cavity here is filled with your vitreous chamber. Now, the vitreous chamber is usually gelatinous compared with your aqueous humor. Okay, so the aqueous humor in the anterior segment usually consists of your mainly your water and your salts. While the vitreous body may also be contained or containing your water and salts, but the vitreous body also contains your collagen, specifically your collagen type 2 fibers and your glycosaminoglycans. Okay, so we'll go specifically to the different layers or structures of the layers of the eye. Again, this is the outermost. You have the cornea and the sclera. At the junction here between cornea and the sclera is you have this limbus. Now, the outer scleral layer, the sclera is the posterior part, is also known as your Tenon's capsule. Now, this outer scleral layer is usually made up of a dense, irregular connective tissue, and this one is continuous with the anterior layer of the cornea. Now, this one usually maintains the overall shape of the eyes. Now, the cornea is the anterior portion of the eye, and this one has your cellular and acellular layers. So there are actually 5 layers of the cornea. You have the outermost, the epithelium, then the Bowman's membrane, then you have your corneal stroma, then you have your Descemet's membrane, and you have your endothelium. Now, your cornea anatomically is avascular. Okay, so and the corneal cells are usually supplied by the middle layer or the middle coat with its nutrients by diffusion from your tear fluid and your aqueous humor. Now, these are again its 5 layers. The epithelium is made up also of 5 to 6 layers of cells. Your Bowman's membrane is clear acellular layer. The stroma is the thickest among all the layers and contains your collagen fibrils. Your Descemet's membrane is also called as your basal lamina of your corneal endothelium. And the endothelium is the innermost layer that may also be functional as your pump, a single layer of pump. Now, this is another way of looking at the histologic structure of your cornea. So you have here the thickest, which is your stroma, or this is also termed as your substantia propria. Then you have here your posterior basement membrane or the Descemet's membrane. Then your Bowman's membrane here is also called as your anterior basement membrane. Then you have your corneal endothelium, or what we call as our posterior epithelium, that's made up of your simple squamous epithelium as well. So here your outermost covering, that's the epithelium, or also termed as anterior epithelium, is usually made up of your stratified squamous epithelium. Okay. So this one is specifically the outermost layer of the cornea, that is the epithelium. So do not be confused. There are 5 layers of the cornea. The outermost layer is the corneal epithelium. And this epithelium is also made up of 5 to 6 layers or 5 to 7 layers. In some books, it says 5 to 7, 5 to 6. However, specifically, you have your cellular and your non-cellular layers. Now, these are actually the specifics of the epithelial layer of the cornea. You have the squamous cell layer, okay, that absorbs the tears and keeps the epithelial cells hydrated. You have the wing cell layer that usually provides communicating abilities with some of the layers in the cornea, and the basal cell layer is responsible for cell renewal. So again, this is the outermost layer of the cornea, that's the epithelium. Now next, so these are the specific layers of the outermost layer, that is the epithelium. Now next to your epithelium is your Descemet's membrane. Okay, so however, your cornea in the epithelial cell layer, or the outermost layer, this one usually provides a barrier. So barrier to foreign bodies, barrier to infectious agents, and this also prevents the electrolytes from the tears to reach into the stroma. Now, the epithelial cells also provides and allows permeability of some other nutrients that includes the oxygen, and the one that usually is essential through the nourishment of some other structures. And this is usually carried through into these cellular structures by the tears and your aqueous humor. Now, the anterior cellular layer of the cornea is made up of your stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. So this one also contains your sensory nerve endings. So next to your epithelium, previously I've mentioned Descemet's membrane. Sorry, I'm referring to the Bowman's membrane. So underneath the epithelium is your Bowman's membrane. Now this one is acellular. It's a collagenous layer, and this may also be referred to as the antigen limiting lamina. So the Bowman's membrane, as what we mentioned, contains your collagen fibers that is not capable of regeneration. Okay, so this Bowman's membrane usually gives strength and stability to the cornea. Now, underneath the Bowman's membrane is called your stroma, or your substantia propria. This is the thickest layer and contains your water, your collagen, and your keratocytes. Now, the fibers of the uh, stroma, the collagen fibers, have a unique arrangement, and this one usually causes the transparency of your cornea. Okay, so the spaces between the collagen fibers are also made up of your keratin sulfate and your chondroitin sulfate. So this is your stroma. So the thickest layer is the stroma, composed of your dense collagenous connective tissue. So you have your collagen fibers, your fibroblasts, and your keratocytes. Okay, so made up of your fibroblasts that is embedded in this glycoprotein matrix. So this is what we mentioned, that is consisting of a type 1 collagen with a perpendicularly oriented layers that usually allows or maintains the transparency of your cornea. So you have here your collagen fibers in a matrix, and these are your stromal cells. Now, underneath your stroma or your substantia propria is your Descemet's membrane here. Now, this Descemet's membrane underneath here is your innermost layer of the cornea. This is your corneal endothelium here. So the Descemet's membrane has two layers of cells. The one that faces the stroma has collagen fibers, and the one that faces the endothelium has your endothelial cells. Now the Descemet's membrane has a capability of regeneration after injury. So along with regeneration, this also functions for protection against injury and infection. Now, this Descemet's membrane in some other books is also called your posterior limiting lamina, or what we call as our true basement membrane in the cornea. Now, the innermost layer is your endothelial layer. Now, this one is functionally called as your pump because this layer pumps from the stroma any excess fluid and prevents its swelling. So, therefore, this also helps maintain the clear and transparent cornea consistency. Now, however, the endothelium also lacks the ability for regeneration after injury. Okay, so again, the posterior aspect or the innermost aspect is your endothelial layer. So because there is ion transport activity here, it keeps the stroma dehydrated. So again, this is has lacking inability in regeneration after injury. So here, this is your anterior portion of the eye, the cornea. If you look into this one histologically, you're able to see its layers. The epithelium, the Bowman's, the stroma, the Descemet's membrane, and your endothelium. So your limbus is the area that is the transition between your cornea and your sclera, or what we call as our corneoscleral junction. Now, the limbus is actually highly vascular. Now, the limbus contains your trabecular meshwork, plus it also contains here your canal of Schlemm. The canal of Schlemm is where the aqueous humor eventually drains and joins into the venous system. Okay, so again, the cornea, the sclera is the white of the eye. The cornea, in between them, the transitional area, that's the limbus. Now, clinically, we do examine or look at the sclera of the eyes because in patients where there is jaundice, when you say jaundice, there is yellowish discoloration of the skin. The sclera also manifests in a yellowish color when there's jaundice. So clinically, you call that as your icteria, or you try to describe that as icteric sclerae. Okay, so here, posteriorly into the outer coat is your sclera. So this covers the posterior 5/6 of the eyeball. Okay, so the outer covering is also called your fibrous tunic. Okay, so you have your sclera that contains an interlacing bundles of collagen, as what we mentioned. This is made up of your dense collagenous connective tissue type, and melanocytes are also found in the deeper region of the sclera. So again, the sclera is the white portion of the eye, and this sclera is continuous with the substantia propria or the stroma layer of the cornea. Okay, so the exposed portion of the cornea is also lined by your non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So if you look into this structure, this one here is your cornea. Then you have your iris. You have your posterior chamber. This one here is the lens. Then you have your vitreous body that contains your vitreous humor here. Then you have your ciliary body. This is the retina, this is the choroid, and this is your sclera. Okay, then this one here is the canal of Schlemm, where eventually your aqueous humor drains into and incorporates itself into the venous system. Now, there are also three layers of the sclera. So you have your episclera that is made up of your dense vascular connective tissue containing these cells. Then you have your sclera proper that is considered to be an avascular structure that's made up of bundles of collagen fibers, and your lamina fusca that usually blends with your arteries, suprachoroidal, and your supraciliary laminae of the uvea. So it is in this lamina fusca where you find also your pigmented cells. That is why histologically you can see that one as brownish in color. Now, from the outer covering of the eyeballs, we go to the middle layer, the middle tunic or the vascular tunic, or this is also what we call as our uvea. So the middle layer, anteriorly, you have the iris, you have the ciliary body. Again, the ciliary body is where the ciliary muscles are embedded, and this one here are your ciliary processes. Posteriorly, this iris and ciliary body is continuous as the choroid. So this one is called your uvea or the vascular tunic. Now the choroid, that is a covering in the posterior aspect of the middle layer, is highly vascular, and together with the ciliary body and the iris, as what we mentioned, that is also termed as your uvea. So this is the innermost covering, the retina, the middle layer, the choroid, and your outermost layer, that's your sclera. So again, the retina, the choroid, and the sclera. Now, the choroid is usually made up of your loose connective tissue, and towards the retina, this choroid is usually covered by your Bruch's membrane, or what we call as our glassy membrane. Okay, so again, the retina, the choroid, and the sclera. The choroid is the vascular layer, so this provides nutrients, especially to the retina, which is our neural structure in the eyes. Now, close to the retina, you have your dense capillary network referred to as your choriocapillary layer. Okay, so here you have your chorocapillary layer, then you have your Bruch's membrane, that is the one that's nearest to the retinal structure. Okay, so that is your choroid. So these are actually the layers of the retina and the choroid. So 1 to 8 are the layers of the retina. The 8 is the outermost layer, which is the retinal pigment epithelium, and the 1 is the innermost layer of the retina. So from the retina, you have here the 9, that's the choroid, the middle layer. Okay, and you have your outermost layer, that's the sclera. Now, the ciliary processes here are usually part of the middle layer. Okay, so these ciliary processes, along with the ciliary body, together with your choroid and the iris, is the one that contributes to the middle layer of the eye. Now, the ciliary body is lined by your two epithelial layer. You have your cuboidal and your columnar epithelial cell layers. Now, these one are usually derivatives of the optic cup, and therefore this epithelial cell layer are part of, strictly speaking, of the retinal layer. Okay, so again, you have here your ciliary muscle. This is usually composed of the smooth muscle. When these ciliary muscles contract, this usually here is the zonule that connects your ciliary body to the lens. When the ciliary muscles contract, this connection here, this is the zonule of Zinn, usually causes the change of the shape in the lens. Now, this changing of the shape of the lens is usually what we call as our process of accommodation. Accommodation is what happens in the lens and the pupils as we try to look at near and far objects. Now, the ciliary processes here are folds of connective tissue. So this one transports the epithelial cells to the posterior chamber, or the fluid is usually transported as aqueous humor. And these epithelial cells usually constitute to the blood aqueous barrier. So it prevents entry of foreign substances that may cause infection into the eyes. Now, this is usually the flow of your aqueous humor. Now, this aqueous humor is usually produced by your ciliary body. Okay, so from the ciliary body, it goes into the posterior and anterior chamber of the eye and is drained eventually into your canal of Schlemm by your trabecular meshwork. So from the trabecular meshwork, it eventually drains into your canal of Schlemm for it to incorporate itself into the venous system. So aqueous humor enters through the anterior chamber through the pupils. So it flows between the lens and the iris. Then it goes into the trabecular meshwork to the canal of Schlemm. Now, obstruction in the aqueous humor will cause the accumulation of this aqueous humor in the anterior chamber and what we call as our glaucoma, because it leads to an increase in the intraocular pressure. Okay, so you have there your trabecular meshwork that eventually propels the aqueous humor towards your canal of Schlemm. Okay, the trabecular meshwork histological structure and your canal of Schlemm. So, in the iris is the one that gives color to the eyes. Now, all the individuals usually has the same number of melanocytes in the iris stroma. Now, it is the amount of the melanin pigment in the melanocytes that varies and determines the eye color. Now, the blue is usually more dominant than the brown ones. Okay, so when usually Asians usually marry with Caucasians or European origin, where you have the blue eyes, the green eyes, usually the offspring, since the brown eyes are more dominant, so there is a high potential or probability that the offsprings may have brown eyes, but that is not 100% all the time. So there is lesser chance that some offsprings may have the recessive trait, that's the blue and the other colored structures. So genetics usually plays a role in the amount of melanin pigment that each melanocytes usually have. Now the iris, here, the anterior surface of the iris is usually contains loose and pigmented stroma. So here, the innermost layer of the iris is usually heavily pigmented. Okay, usually the posterior surface, this one, the posterior surface of the iris. Okay, so this is your anterior chamber, this is the posterior chamber, this is your two-layered, heavily pigmented iris epithelium. So another histologic picture that will tell us there's the heavily pigmented area here in the posterior aspect of the iris. Now, the iris also contains your the sphincter pupillae and your dilator pupillae that regulates the opening and the closing of the iris. This is your pupils here. This is your circular or the sphincter pupillae. And this one here is your radial muscles. Okay, so this sphincter and constrictor pupillae usually causes the dilation and the constriction of the pupils. Remember, when sympathetic response is activated, the pupils usually is dilated. You just remember when you see your crush or somebody that's significant, at a far distance, you can actually see that person. Why? Because sympathetic stimulation. You see your crush or somebody that's significant, it activates the adrenaline. You can actually see them at a far distance. Just memorize that one aspect so that you will not be confused. Sympathetics, pupillary dilatation. Okay, so there. Sympathetic control, pupillary dilatation. Now here, this is the lens as what we mentioned from the ciliary muscles. I mean, you have here your zonule fibers or specifically termed as your zonule of Zinn. Okay, so once this contracts, this pulls the zonule fibers and causes the shape of the lens to change. Okay, that is for the process of accommodation when you try to look at near and far objects. Again, this is the ciliary muscles, your zonules, and that is your lens. This is the lens, this is the zonules, and these are your ciliary body. You have here your ciliary muscles. Now, the lens consists of a capsule and a fiber. So you have here the lens capsule, you have here the lens fibers, and you also have here your subcapsular epithelium. So it does not contain blood vessels or nerves. Okay, so these are the sphincter and your pupillary dilator muscles, as what we know for the process of accommodation. Now, there are also three groups of smooth muscle fibers in the ciliary muscle. You have the outer longitudinal muscle. You have the middle radial muscle, or also called your oblique muscle, that this one is attached to the uvea. And you have the inner muscle or the circular muscle that's primarily attached to the ciliary and to the ciliary body and the iris. Okay, so these are the groups of smooth muscles in the ciliary muscle. Again, your ciliary body is what contains your ciliary muscles. So these are its function for accommodation. This one also secretes your aqueous humor, and this also helps in the drainage of the aqueous humor, usually in the anterior chamber. Okay, so you have your blood aqueous barrier that is made up of the non-pigmented epithelium in the retina. So lens, you just go back to the embryonic origin of the structures that we have earlier on that is found in a table. So just review where the lens comes from. Then the anterior side of the lens is made up of your simple epithelium, while the basal side is covered by your basement membrane. Okay. Here at the margin of the lens, you have your lens fibers, which are filled with your crystalline proteins. Now, new lens fibers are usually formed from epithelial cells all throughout life. Now, your aqueous humor that is found in the anterior segment usually contains the same composition as the blood plasma, although this aqueous humor has less proteins. Okay, so it's made up of water. You have your ions. These proteins, although lesser than the blood plasma, then you have your ascorbate, your glucose, the lactate, and your amino acids. Now, as what we mentioned, the aqueous humor functions for maintaining intraocular pressure, providing nutrition and carries waste products and transports other nutrients into the other structures of the eye. Plus, this may also help in the immunologic function because it usually provides defenses against foreign bodies and pathogens. So I guess we have discussed the flow of the aqueous humor that eventually drains into the canal of Schlemm. Now, the posterior aspect of the middle layer is you have your choroid. Now, the choroid is highly pigmented and highly vascular. This is usually rich in your melanocytes that gives it its dark color. And it is the middle layer. So, posteriorly, it is found between your sclera and your retina. So again, this functions for nourishment and blocks the light that enters through the sclera in order to prevent the scattering of the light rays. Now, histologically, your choroid also has these four histologic parts. Here, the outermost is your suprachoroidal lamina, followed by your choroidal stroma, here, the stroma. Suprachoroidal lamina, you have your stroma. Then you have your choriocapillary layer and your Brooks membrane. Remember, it is the Brooks membrane that is the one that is near or nearest to the retinal layer. So your suprachoroidal lamina is the transition zone from the sclera or the outermost covering. Now this one contains these cells and fibers, okay? And this carries your posterior ciliary arteries and nerves. Now next to your outermost layer is your stroma. Now this one is also made up of your loose connective tissue and also contains these cells. Okay, so the arteries that are found in the stroma are branches of your short posterior ciliary arteries, and the veins usually ultimately drain into your ophthalmic veins. You have both superior and your inferior ophthalmic veins. The next layer is your choriocapillary layer that consists of a rich capillary network, and this one nourishes the outer retinal layer. Now, from this one is the innermost layer that connects to the retina. That's your Brooks membrane. This one usually extends from the optic nerve head to the ora serrata. Okay, so this constitutes the outer limit of the retina. So from the middle layer, we go now to the inner layer of the eye, and that is the retina. So you have the non-visual part of the retina that is responsible for the blood aqueous barrier. Then you have the photosensitive part of the retina that contains your rods and cones. Then this one is considered to be your retinal pigment epithelium. So all of these are parts of the retinal layer. So it is the innermost layer that is cellular, and this one is the neural layer of the eye that's usually containing your rods and cones, and this one connects and sends signal to the brain. That is why the brain interprets the image that we are trying to look at. So your retinal pigment epithelium is the outermost layer of the retina. So this contains your pigment melanin and your lipofuscin. Okay, so this retinal pigment epithelium is the outermost layer, and along with that is you have the retina proper that contains your photoreceptor cells. You have the rods and the cones. Remember, the one that's responsible for color is your cones, and the rods is usually functioning for low light levels or dim light. Okay, so these rods are usually more numerous than cones, but it is the cones that usually functions during daytime. And this one is usually responsible for color vision. So these are the comparison of your rods and cones. Now the ora serrata here is the transition from the photosensitive part to the blood aqueous barrier. Okay, so that is the ora serrata. So again, these are the layers of the retina. The outermost layer is the pigment epithelium. Next to that is your photoreceptor layer. Then you have your outer limiting membrane here. Then your external nuclear layer. This one contains the nuclei of the photoreceptor cells. Outer plexiform, then you have your inner nuclear layer. This one contains the nuclei of the bipolar cells. And the innermost layer is the inner limiting membrane or the Brooks membrane. Okay. So again, histologically or embryologically speaking, this outer pigment epithelium is derived from your optic cup and is lined by your simple columnar epithelium. Okay, so these are the retinal pigment epithelium. So here you have your pigment epithelium cells, your Brooks membrane that is considered to be the innermost membrane or lining of the retina. So there is also such a clinical condition that leads to retinal detachment when photoreceptor cells becomes weak and the retina detaches from the eye. So if this is really severe, since this is a neural structure that can cause blindness into an individual. I remember I have one colleague in medical school when they were playing basketball. There was a great blow to the eye that causes retinal detachment. So it actually causes the left eye to be blind. Okay, so legally it's blind. There's no visual acuity there on the left eye because of the retinal detachment. Now again, these are your photoreceptors. You have the rods and you have your cones. The rods contains your rhodopsins, while the cones usually contains your photopsins. So the one that we mentioned earlier, those are the differences of your rods and cones. Okay, so rod cells, morphologic differences. The rod cells have membrane discs and your cone cells have invaginations in their plasma membrane. Invaginations here. Then you have your membrane discs. So again, this is what we mentioned as the rods and cones. So color and for day vision, this one is usually responsible for dim light vision or for the black and white vision. Okay, so that's the rods and cones. Now, remember that the rods and cones usually connect with the CNS via the bipolar neurons and ganglions. Now, these one are contained in your outer plexiform layer. Okay, so these are the other layers of your retina. Okay, containing some of the cells. You have your Muller cells, the ganglion and bipolar cells. Okay, and you have your cones and the rods. Now, these are the neurons and supporting cells of the eyes. So, photoreceptors, your conducting neurons, you have the bipolar and your ganglion cells. You have your association neurons, the ones that links one structure to another. And your supporting neuroglial cells, you have the Mullers, the microglia, and your astrocytes. So this one is your optic nerve and the one that is usually found in the innermost retina. So this optic nerve, as it exits through the retina, okay, it usually blocks the visual field. Therefore, where this optic nerve exits the retina of the eyes, this is what we call as our blind spot because there are no photoreceptors there and it usually blocks the visual field. Therefore, this is what we call as our blind spot where the optic disc is. Okay, so you have that optic nerve and your optic disc. The retina is usually supplied by your retinal artery and you're drained by your venous system. Okay. Now, when we go to the clinics later on, we can actually look at the blood vessels of the retina. We do that by the use of your ophthalmoscope. It is a scope that when you put that on the eye of an individual and you as the examiner will look into that scope, you are able to see your blood vessels and the characteristics of the blood vessels. Now, this area here is what we call as our fundus, where the congregation or the blood vessels usually are rich in its network supply. Now, when you examine that one with the use of your ophthalmoscope, you are able to somehow see some clinical conditions. You have your diabetic retinopathy and your hemorrhages. So this one may be very, very difficult to look at and examine. It takes time, it takes skill, it takes coordination. Okay, so but this is very essential when you go to your clinics for you to be able to examine your blood vessels. Now, at the posterior aspect of the retina, you have here the macula. The macula is the central area found at the posterior aspect of the retina. Now, this macula is the center for highest visual acuity. Now, in the middle of the macula, central to the macula, is your fovea centralis. Now, that is the specific area where the bipolar and ganglion cells are usually found, and this is also considered to be the area of highest visual acuity. The fovea contains no rod cells. Only cone cells are found in your fovea. Okay, so you have here the fovea, that is the center of your macula. The macula is the central aspect in the posterior part of the retina. But central to the macula is your fovea. Okay, so you have that macula and your fovea centralis. So again, if we look into this structure, the outer, you have your cornea that is continuous posteriorly with the sclera. You have the middle coat, you have the iris, and you have your ciliary body, and continued posteriorly as your choroid. Then you have your innermost layer. This is your retina. So this one here is the optic disc or the optic papilla. This is considered to be the blind spot where the optic nerve leaves the retinal layer or the posterior aspect of the eyes. Okay, you have these clinical conditions that may result to blindness or difficulty in your visual acuity. So this may eventually lead to blindness, more commonly found among elderlies. Another one that's specifically common among elderlies is the opacity of the lens, and you call that the cataract, because there are some changes in the as one grows old, so these are usually common. Now, from the coats of the eye, we go to some accessory structures. Now, we look at the conjunctiva. So the conjunctiva is continuous with your cornea and your sclera. So there are actually two types of conjunctiva. This one here is your bulbar conjunctiva, and this one here, in the innermost aspect of the eyelid, this one is your palpebral conjunctiva. Now, the conjunctiva may also have some common clinical conditions. You have your conjunctivitis, okay? And this one is the common site where some foreign bodies usually lodge. Okay, so that is the conjunctiva. You have the bulbar. This one is the palpebral. Clinically speaking, we try to assess this area here for its color, whether it's pinkish or it's pale. That will actually tell us the vascularity of the conjunctiva. Will somehow give us an orientation whether the patient may be anemic or not. They may be lacking in hemoglobin. Okay, so we look at it as either pale or pinkish. Okay, so you have your bulbar and your palpebral as the more common. Then your conjunctiva may also have these layers, your epithelium and your substantia propria or the stroma that's made up of your adenoid layer and your fibrous layer. Now, next accessory structure of the eye is the eyelids. So this is the upper eyelids. This one is the lower lid. So this one usually functions for protection, prevents entry of microorganisms and foreign bodies. It also protects against bright light. And this one usually distributes the tears over the cornea. That is preventing dehydration and preventing dry eyes. Now, protection and secretion, distribution, and drainage of tears. Remember that when the eyes become dry, this is usually not a good condition. So when you have dry eyes, that will eventually lead to eye discomfort, that will eventually lead to uh, distortion of the visual acuity later on, and that will also lead to a lot of sequelae of some eye abnormalities. Now, in the lids, you have your meibomian glands. These are actually sebaceous glands. It produces an oily layer on the surface that will actually prevent the dehydration or the evaporation of the tears. Now, this one will help lubricate the eye because the oily layer here prevents the evaporation of the tears. Now, if this meibomian gland is blocked, this is what we actually call as your calazion. Okay, remember in layman's term, you actually just call them yung mga bujinggit there. Can actually see some mass. So these are actually blockage of your meibomian glands. Okay, this one. Blockage of an oil gland or the meibomian glands. Now, you also have your sebaceous glands in the eyelash. So, you have your glands of Z's. These are actually small modified sebaceous glands that when they are infected, it causes stye or your what we call as our hordeolum. Now, aside from sebaceous glands, we also have your apocrine glands of the eyelash. These are actually small sweat glands. So you have that as termed as your glands of Moll. Now, other accessory lacrimal glands, you have the glands of Cross and your glands of your Wolfring. These are actually serous tubo-alveolar glands. Now, the glands of Cross usually lies into the subconjunctival tissue, while the Wolfring usually are situated at the upper border of the tarsal glands. So these are your accessory lacrimal glands into the eyes. So again, I guess you need to look at the anatomic structure first. Orient yourselves with the coats of the eye before you even try to assimilate and read through the histologic structures because they are more specific. They look at the histologic aspect. It becomes confusing if you do not have a strong foundation of the anatomic structures of the eyes. Now, if you have questions later on, just message me through my Telegram account. Okay, and if I cannot answer immediately, rest assured that I will have to answer them today if you have questions. So just continue making use of your time for this morning to read through your books so that it will also help you prepare for the coming pre-final exams. So it may be a gloomy day today, a rainy day, but we still have to study and go through and read through our notes. Okay, so thank you everyone. And I hope that you are able to learn and assimilate the lecture for today. Thank you.